love it out there.
But yeah, I keep forgetting. I don't know who I'm thinking of. Maybe I'm thinking of my friend Jordan. I have a friend Jordan out there. Really cool guy, Jordan Peace. He's backstage at the conference. He's backstage at all of these UFO conferences, helping out with the AV. He's in the Northwest. I got totally mixed up.
Yeah, he must be a very good-looking gentleman.
Oh, he's a good guy. He's just a good guy. He's a good, helpful fella like you. He's a level-headed, good guy that I like talking with in this field. And maybe that's why, maybe you've got kind of a Northwestern kind of attitude.
I do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you do have that Northeastern accent kind of a little bit once in a while.
Hey, yep, sure do.
Mm-hmm. So I apologize for that.
It's no problem.
But
I've been called worse middle names.
Yeah, it sparked conversation.
Yeah.
About where you're from and everything.
That's right.
All right. By the way, are you like in what area of the Northeast now that
I am in the great state of Maine.
Okay, that's what I thought.
We get a lot of snow. I'm on top of a mountain in Maine and have a beautiful view of beautiful observation decks on my property. The only thing is I haven't seen a UFO there.
That's too
but it's
bad.
Bound to happen. I have seen what do you call those, lenticular clouds or whatever?
Yeah, lenticular clouds.
Lenticular clouds. I have seen them, and I've taken some pictures, and gee, there's some been really interesting ones that look exactly like a disc. I could see how someone could take a picture of it and send it to someone, and someone first look, you'd think it's a flying saucer. But yeah, I'm right across on a mountain and situated in a place where I can look out over New Hampshire's White Mountains, Mount Washington.
Cool.
It's quite beautiful, actually.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, those lenticular clouds, we had them in Colorado, of course, which is mountainous, and there were stories about them recently in Texas. And not only, there are people who mistake them for UFOs, but there are people who know exactly what they are, but still believe they're UFOs or there are UFOs hidden inside of them.
They're cloaking, yes.
Yeah. A lot of people believe that. You're laughing at these people who are my friends.
No, I'm not.
Thanks, Martin.
I totally buy into it. Yeah.
You believe it too.
Yeah.
So, I'm just gonna. I was just watching a show, and this is really cool because when I work out at the gym, I watch HGTV. I don't have that channel, and I'm fascinated by it. But I saw you can buy an island if you've got like $1 million or $1.5 million. You can buy an island in Maine where that has a little like house on it.
Wow.
Do you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
There's I think there's thousands of islands off of Maine. I'm not really sure. There's a lot.
Yeah, so you could buy your own UFO
yeah, they were
island.
selling lighthouses back here. I knew of there was someone bought a lighthouse for like $50,000, and it's right on a point, right over the ocean. I don't know what you're going to do though. It'd be kind of a weird place to live, maybe. But still, I was kind of surprised that the Coast Guard sold them off so cheaply.
Yeah. Wow, that is kind of cool. That'd be fun.
Yeah, it's better than $1 million,
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it. I'll first talk about our guest. We've got an exciting guest for today. That is Denice Marcel, and you may recognize the last name from Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer at the Roswell Air Force Base, who was the first to go look at this material that crashed and was the first to say, hey, man, this is weird stuff, and bring it back to the base. And he's famous. He's in the pictures holding up balloon material. Material which he says is not the same he collected from the deserts out there near Roswell, New Mexico. And, he was told to shut up, essentially, that we're going to tell people it's a balloon, and that's the official story. He said, yes, sir. He stuck with that story and did his duty, and so they debunked the whole thing, and it didn't become a big deal. And some people don't realize this. Roswell, when it happened, was a bit of a news story at the time. The next day, they said, oh, we made a big mistake. It was just a balloon. And the story was over. Not even UFO researchers really knew much or talked about it until the 70s when Jesse Marcel began to talk about it. I guess he talked with some friends. UFO researchers eventually found out about it, the most famous being Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman then interviewed him, and he said, I think time has passed. I'm retired now, and I think people should know that that wasn't a balloon that I picked up. Even though we told people that, that's what I was told to tell people. And so Stanton and others started doing the research, found other witnesses who upheld Jesse Marcel's story. And Jesse Marcel never said anything about aliens, but of course some people started saying there were alien bodies recovered, witnesses who made these claims. And now Roswell's famous and a big deal. So I was good friends, and we've had him on the show with Jesse Marcel Jr. He was a wonderful person, and some of you may know I was helping to run the UFO lectures out there in Roswell during the July 4th festival to mark the anniversary of the crash. And in fact, that's coming up this weekend, so I'll be out there with Denise, who is the guest tonight. But unfortunately, Jesse Marcel Jr. will not be joining us because he passed away a couple years ago. And that was really sad because, as you'll hear, Denise and I talk about her father quite a bit. I mean, I really love this guy. I did at least a website for him and helped him promote his book. And he was just a wonderful person. He was funny in that he was so humble. He would never push his book and stuff, and I always trying to tell him to do that and to do like Stanton Friedman, because he was in interviews with Stanton a lot, and everybody knows that's seen an interview with Stanton Friedman. He always brings a book when he's on stage, in a panel, anything. He always has a book in hand so he can flash the book and say, "It's right here in my latest book." And I don't blame him, because you got to sell books. This field, people don't make money, so I don't blame him whatsoever. It's just smart marketing. And, he took the time to write it in a book, so you should go check out the book because it's going to have more of that information. So I used to try to coach Jesse Marcel Jr. to do that, but he was just he was just a humble person and not into self-promotion and stuff. But great guy. So we're going to be talking to his daughter. Why his daughter? How is this relevant? Sometimes people say, well, what does she know? She's just a grandkid. She's not going to know nothing. I don't know who that guy is.
Sounds like he's from Maine, though.
Yeah, some guy in Maine sitting out there. What do I care about this Denice Marcel? I don't want to hear about UFOs. So actually, Denise is now working with MUFON. She is actually starting up the L.A. Los Angeles chapter of MUFON. And it once was one of the bigger chapters, and then there was kind of some changes there where I think the section director went away, and now they found a new one, and she's getting stuff started out there. So very exciting. And we'll talk to her about MUFON, about UFOs, how all of this affected her family, and a great talk. And we'll talk about the Roswell UFO Festival, which Denise and I will be at, along with Stanton Friedman and others, this weekend in Roswell. So that's the guest. Exciting stuff, huh, Martin?
It is. I do want to bring up a point, though, that you made.
Okay.
You said back when Roswell happened, and the next day they retracted that the Army Air Force collected a disc and they changed it to the weather balloon. You mentioned that no UFO researchers got into it at that time. Well, you know what? That was kind of the birth of the UFO research. There was no one really doing it before 1947, unless I'm wrong.
You are
Okay.
halfway wrong. You're right that everything started up in 1947, but this is really interesting about this period of time. But Roswell was not the impetus. The birth of the UFO, even though it happened in 1947, had nothing to do with Roswell. Instead, it had more to do with Kenneth Arnold.
Okay, sure.
He was the big case that prompted the starting of Blue Book. Blue Book, nor many of these others even really talked about Roswell. However, if you look into 1947 and at the Roswell Museum, they have some of this material there. There were a lot of sightings during this period of time. Even if you listen to the radio show for Roswell, they say, finally we'll find out what these mysterious discs are that people are seeing all over the country. So UFO sightings were just happening very frequently during this period of time. Kenneth Arnold was the one that really kind of was the match that lit the flame, but in the undercurrent there, going unnoticed was Roswell. So right and wrong there. My friend.
Yeah, and then if you can think of the Ghost rockets in 1946, and the Foo Fighters during the war, it was all leading up to it, but I don't think anyone was taking it serious until about that time, and I think Arnold was just a few weeks apart from Roswell, if I'm right.
You're right, just a few weeks prior.
Yeah. Interesting, though.
Yeah, really interesting, and I recommend people look up that period of time, like even that summer of 1947, a lot of sightings, and that's when everything started up, and that's what's just kind of interesting about how when Roswell finally did come into focus, it was right, it had happened during this period of time, which I think gives it more credibility, that there were a lot of sightings during this period of time, and perhaps one did crash.
Absolutely. Could have happened.
Could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk to Denise about that. Fun stuff. But let's talk about UFO news, Mr. Willis.
All right. Well, this week I'd like to talk about a sighting reported in New Jersey. It was a low-flying, massive triangle. This happened back on June 22nd. And it's MUFON case number 66935. And what happened was there was a witness visiting his parents in Manlapan, New Jersey, kind of a small city or small town. And he was leaving, and he was packing his car. Something caught his eye, and he looks up toward the sky and sees this object flying toward him. He said it wasn't, really large at the time, but it started, as it gained closer, it started getting larger and larger, and it was about 300 feet wide or so and about 400 feet long, a black triangular shape, and he said that no light reflected on it. He's probably talking about either street light or moonlight or starlight or whatever, but he says there was no reflections on it, which is kind of odd and kind of what you hear. A lot of people say you can sort of see through these things, and it's kind of interesting when someone actually confirms what you hear a lot of other people say. They're really into the topic or whatever. This is kind of like a bystander, and he's saying, there was no lights at all, and the thing was pretty scary, and he did a drawing of it, and it's kind of a unique looking triangular, almost looks like a Star Trek type vehicle or something like that. And his father came out and witnessed it as well, and it's really an interesting sighting. And again, that just happened just last week, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really weird. And I love these sightings. My uncle has one similar, except it was a rectangular object that blocks out all of the stars. It reminds me of like a Close Encounter type of experience, from the movie or something. But so many of these really odd reports, and they make sense. I mean, if something was flying around, night would be the time to do it. And if it's just blocking out stars, people probably wouldn't notice it. And even if you did, you wouldn't know what it was. And, who would believe you? You can't really prove anything. You can't take a picture of that. So all you have is a report. But a lot of people have similar reports. Of course, David Marler, who we're both fans of, writes about the triangular UFOs, and such an interesting and fascinating topic.
It is, and one other thing he said, which you also hear a lot, is that it moved very quickly and changed directions on a dime, which is another fascinating part of it.
Yeah, how weird, huh?
Mm-hmm. And I don't buy that a lot of people say that these are, top secret military, because I don't know why they would fly over where they fly over, for one.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what's interesting is David Marler, as well as Bob Bigelow, his National Institute of Discovery Sciences, both did research to figure out if these were government, and they determined they were not. However, I did see, this is interesting, just a couple weekends ago at the local MUFON meeting here in Phoenix, they have a great group here. Michael Schratt was talking, And he says he believes that there are these big triangular craft, and kind of talks about some of the circumstantial evidence leading to some of that. So I guess it's possible, but it's an interesting and an amazing phenomenon, that's for sure.
Now, is Michael Schrad, he's the one that has all the military history of craft or something, if that's the one
that's his specialty.
That, right?
Yep, yeah. He's a by profession, he is like drafts. He works on the ACAD and stuff like that to draft up stuff. So he always does these models and drafts of UFOs and black projects and different aircraft, which is what he's fascinated with. So, yeah, really interesting stuff.
He contacted me once. I remember. Is there? Yeah, I just can't remember why I didn't have him on the show, but it seems to me there was some controversy, but I don't really remember what it was at the time.
Well, there's always controversy, but you know what? He's a good guy, and he's I think he speaks from his heart, what he really believes and what he believes he's found. And I very much encourage you to have him on the show because he's very, very interesting. He's so funny. When you talk to him one-on-one, he's kind of awkward in conversation, but when he gets talking on his topic, he's just spectacular. And then when you get him on stage, oh my gosh, he lights up. He really, we've got several lectures online of Michael's, and people ought to watch him. He's got a great, he's a great presenter. Yeah, so very, very interesting stuff. And he always backs his information up with the sources and, to add credibility to what he's talking about.
Well, I'll have to look for his email.
Yeah, definitely recommend him.
Sure, thanks.
So a couple other UFO sightings to talk about. One of these is, and we'll see what you guys think. It's one of those ones that, is kind of creating controversy over what it might be. And these are some lights that were caught in Tarma, Peru, June 17th, 2015. They were posted on YouTube. They show multiple lights. They're white in the video that kind of come on and off. And this father and son who took the videos thought they were really weird. They thought they might be attached to a large spaceship. Of course, it could be that they're Chinese lanterns. And that's what's always difficult with just lights in the sky. And depending on how they maneuver and everything as to whether or not they're Chinese lanterns. We posted a video in the story of someone launching a Chinese lantern demonstrating how they can be mistaken for a UFO. If you remember, I took one of those videos also with some Chinese lanterns. But, so this is an interesting one. It's hard to decide for sure, what it might be. But, people can go online and check that out. One of the things that they left out in that episode of Chasing UFOs that I was in with, Jason was in it as well. We went out to the local mountains to look for UFOs. We saw flares over the Barry Goldwater Range, which happens a lot out here. But there was also a light to our north. And so we trained these cameras. We had a big lens. They had a bigger lens. It's an amazing lens with night vision. And very quickly, Ben McGee was able to say, hey, that's a Chinese lantern. And I was always suspicious because they look interesting at night. But I was always suspicious. If anyone saw the show, they will know it wasn't that great of a show. James Fox and Ben McGee have both come out and said that they're really disappointed with how it turned out. But I'm kind of suspicious that the production crew, launched that Chinese lantern to try to trick us or just to add some excitement.
Oh. Wow.
I know.
Jeez.
And I wouldn't put it past them, so kind of frustrating. But yeah, see what you guys think of that. Did you see that video at all?
Yeah, I looked at it, and it's it's so hard to tell with the Chinese lanterns, and these things that look like they're just floating, but it's really hard to tell. If they're keeping the same altitude, because there could be just a distance away. And they sort of change the formation a little bit here and there, but, it's lights in the sky, so hard to say what it really is.
Well, and that's the hard part, is lights in the sky. What can you make of it? And That's why I think, people argue, oh, we've got cameras and so many cameras around these days. But even if you get a camera, even if you have, it could be some extraordinary craft from some other planet with a couple lights on it. And we do get it on camera. Even if you have a good camera at night, it's hard to make anything out. So that argument that, just because we have cameras and everything around doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get good footage. And even then, it could be faked. So you need that witness testimony along with it. But yeah, this is one of those that you just got to go interesting, but who knows?
Right. Righto.
This is kind of cool. A flurry of reports in the UK. Now, this is another one where the photo that was taken of a light in the sky at night is not that impressive. And actually, the photo looks like it's some point of light that is out of focus. And, of course, that doesn't mean it's not mysterious or strange, but it just is out of focus. And I show, a picture here, and there's a link to a video where someone shows how Venus gets out of focus and can look weird, and lots of people mistake it for something strange. This story would not be a big deal if it was just this one photo alone. But the lady who took the photo says she sees this, light that is flying around strangely over the town of Newbury and, near Newbury. She's in Hungerford. At night often, and she says, at one particular night, the night she took this picture, she ran over to her neighbor's house and said, look, and they all saw it. And so the Newbury Weekly News posted her picture and wrote about this, and they started getting a flurry, they say, of reports. So a bunch of people said, hey, I've seen the same thing. And all of the reports are very similar. They say several times they'll see a light in the sky that maneuvers strangely, and it blinks green and blue, which is really odd. So pretty interesting. And here's the hard part. Some people may say, well, why don't they just get out there and film it? But as we just talked about, that's not very easily done. And even if you just get this video of a light in the sky, that's not going to necessarily tell us much, even if it is, going green and blue, because especially if a star is very low on the horizon and if there's pollution, it can twinkle and look all kinds of different colors. So really interesting, I think, just because there's so many other witnesses who have come forward in this area of England to say that they've seen this odd UFO.
Yeah, and I don't always buy it when they say it's Venus. You always hear people saying it could be Venus and all that. But it'd be interesting to find out if these lights were stationary or if they were actually part of the, it's kind of like an orb type shape on the picture that you have in the story. So it makes you wonder if the whole thing was flashing color or if it was stationary lights.
Right. They said that the objects moved, and this is what's also interesting. If it's Venus, often, and we get this report a lot, and I remember with MUFON, when it's Venus, people say, I see it every night. It seems to move and change colors, but it's always in this one area. And if anybody stared at a point of light, go stare at Venus. It'll look like it's moving, especially if there's clouds going by. It looks like it's flying around when it's not. But that's something that is seen every night, But when these people say some nights they see it, sometimes they don't, that's a little more odd because Venus is going to be in the same place at the same time every evening. Could be that they're looking at different times in the evening, perhaps. But, I don't know. There's some little clues that make this seem like that. And there's so many people. I don't know that they would all fall for Venus, thinking it's a UFO.
Yeah. Yeah, you just hear that a lot, though.
Yeah, you do. So finally, my last story. And this one's really exciting, I think. This is the NASA administrator, Charles Bolden, who kind of talked about aliens in Area 51. This is pretty cool. So he was in the UK, England making some more UFO news here. But he was talking to some school children, and he told them he essentially thinks that we're going to find life outside of Earth one day. So one of the kids asked him, it was little Carmen Deering, age 10, asked him, do you believe in aliens? essentially. And he said, I do believe that we will someday find other forms of life, or a form of life, if not in our solar system, then in some of the other solar systems, the billions of the solar systems in the universe. So he says, yeah, he believes in aliens, which isn't too much of a surprise because a lot of NASA administrators have said that. He is the big boss right now, but so that's pretty cool. But more interesting, I think, is that he says Area 51 does exist. He was asked about that. He says it's real, but it doesn't house any aliens. Furthermore, he says he's been there. He says, I've been to a place called that, but it's a normal research and development place. I never saw any aliens or alien spacecraft or anything when I was there. I think because of the secrecy of the aeronautics research that goes on there, it's right for people to talk about aliens being there. So he's been there. He didn't, expound on that to say if this was in a official NASA capacity. He used to be a test pilot for the Navy before he became an astronaut for many years. After he was an astronaut, he actually then went back into the military. And then he retired, and before Obama, had nominated him to take over NASA.
Well, I've been kind of on the fence about Area 51 myself. You hear stories like Bob Lazar and other things, sightings over it and things like that. I mean, I'm sure there's some very unique craft that's being developed or whatever, but for there actually be aliens there underground and all that stuff, I don't know. I just, it's one of those things that, again, I'm totally on the fence over.
Yeah, right. And I mean, even Bob Lazar didn't say he saw any aliens there or that there were aliens there, but we do have reports from, I think, much more dubious sources that say there were aliens there. And so, yeah, good point, buddy, good point. The mystery continues.
That's right. And anytime something's like cloaked in secrecy, conspiracies abound, really.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that guy in Maine is going, what are you talking about? Of course there's aliens in Area 51. NASA's lying to us all the time. Bunch of idiots on this podcast.
You have to give that guy a name like Lumberjack Joe or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Lumberjack out there in the Northeast Maine guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you to our listener there in Maine and to the rest of our listeners for joining us for the news. But thank you, Martin, for being here with us to talk about the news of the day or of the week.
Well, most certainly. Thank you.
All right. So, and everybody remember, Martin has his own podcast, Podcast UFO, which will be featuring Michael Schratt probably in the not too distant future.
That's right.
All right. So, but without further ado, let's talk to Denice Marcel. I am super excited to welcome Denice Marcel to the show. Hello.
Hi. How are you doing?
I am doing very well, and I'm getting excited to see you in Roswell in a couple weeks.
I know. I can't believe it's been 2 years since I saw you last down there.
It'll be a week, actually, isn't it?
Yep, next week.
Oh, my gosh. It's coming up so quickly. So, and do you fly out there?
No, we're actually driving. We go because I live in Los Angeles. I'm just leaving, doing a little road trip at the same time. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, wow. So that's a long one for you. It's long for me. Every year I make this long drive to Roswell on the July 4th weekend. And so that's coming up. And it's mostly, at least the first half for me, is really boring desert through Arizona. But then it gets really pretty once you get to Las Cruces and go up through the mountains and everything.
Oh, that does sound beautiful. Yeah, we go through Flagstaff and that area.
So it's a little bit prettier of a drive, but it's really nice to be talking to you and to have you on the show. Of course, for people who don't know, you are the daughter of Jesse Marcel Jr., who I knew very well, and I am so honored to have known him. He was such a wonderful person. and then.
Oh, it was wonderful. You actually helped to have his website up, so you were amazing. Thank you for that too.
Oh yeah, it was my pleasure. And you know what? Just right off the bat, meeting your father was wonderful. Right off the bat, I think it was at a MUFON symposium. I was so excited to talk to your dad, and I was like, "Hey there, I'd like to ask you some questions." And the first thing he says is, "That'd be great. Let me buy you a beer." And so I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I should be buying you the drink." So right off the bat, it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed talking with him and meeting him every time. He was such a warm, person. You could tell he's a very honest person, and someone who wanted to serve his country and did so, and help people, which he did in the medical profession. So, yeah, great guy.
Yeah, he always wanted to make people feel like that he was very approachable. He wanted to be able to share, his experience with anybody that had, wanted to ask the questions.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, his father is the man who was the intelligence officer at the Roswell Army Air Field base when the craft in Roswell crashed, and he was the first one to the scene from the Air Force to take a look at that, and always felt that it was something unusual and that it wasn't a balloon.
Yeah, oh yeah, he 100% didn't believe that it was a balloon at all. His words were always, he didn't think it was something from this earth or this world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same belief my father had too. He never saw that same material ever again. So I have to believe it wasn't from here either.
Did you ever get to talk to your grandfather about all this?
Well, one of my brothers talked to him a little bit more than I did. He was actually pretty young when he talked to him about it. In fact, it's kind of a little bit of a funny story. It was my brother John. He was probably, I think, around 7 or 8 years old, and it was around probably 1975 or so. And he happened to be homeschooled from sick. He was homesick, and I guess my dad, if you knew my dad, his routine always was he on his lunch break would be to go home, eat a tuna fish sandwich, eat a tomato, and listen to Paul Harvey. And that day, Paul Harvey was on, and I guess there was something that they made an announcement like, there's been $1 million reward offered for anybody who can show proof of finding like a spaceship or something like that. And I guess my mom was there, and he looked back at my mom and he's like, wow, I wish I would have kept a piece of that. And my brother was, what are you talking about? Kept a piece of what? And he said, oh, well, your grandfather and I found or saw pieces of something that we believed was what he called at that time a flying saucer. And my brother's like, I want to get Grandpa on the phone right now. So he did, and my grandfather kind of reiterated that, about what he saw, this strange metallic debris. He also said that there was a ton of like what I guess we would call today kind of like looked like fiber optics. And he just said that there was just so much of it out there. And then he talked a little bit about like the hieroglyphs. I guess that's the best way to kind of describe it. And that's what my dad had really saw too, and that's what really made the impression on my father too, were those hieroglyphics. Mm-hmm. And then, as a family, we didn't really talk about it too much, but we knew there was always something there. But it wasn't like an in-depth discussion until we got a little bit older about what really happened out there. We knew something happened. We knew Grandpa found something really weird, and it had really been a big impact on my dad.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did your family handle this? Because, I'm into the topic, so most of my family, actually, I think more so than other families, are really open to it. But there's some people who skirt around it, or, they just don't want to talk about it. Was it similar in your family, or was your family more open? Did they like to kind of...
Oh, no, we really actually embraced it, because, it's kind of funny. I mean, when we were growing up, we always thought that that's what everybody else thought, because we were in a really small, isolated town. I mean, literally where I went to school is now a museum. It was a little red schoolhouse. So, I mean, I came from a really, really small town. And so as children, I think we just thought that everybody thought that there was life out there. And so we did have discussions about it all the time, and we would literally be camping out. We camped out so much because we were in Montana, and one of our goals when we were camping out at night was to see if we could see anything up in the sky moving around, because my dad always said, hey, you know, there always could be something looking back at us. I'm like, if that's true. And so he also had a very big, huge, enormous-sized telescope in our backyard that he built from the top to the bottom that we would look at also, like practically every weekend we did that. So would have been probably abnormal to not talk about it.
In your family? And this was a telescope that your father had built?
Yeah, he built it from like the scratch. This was early, like 1970, 71 when we moved to Montana, because my dad had been based earlier than that in California in the Navy. And then he got out of the Navy and moved to Montana and went into the National Guard. And one of his things, I think it was probably because of what happened to him when he was a kid, was seeing that the debris had such an impact on him that he loved astronomy. So he decided at that time just to build this telescope. And I remember that the mirror was a huge mirror, and all of us would take turns in our garage taking this red polish and just polishing it until it got that perfect, you know, reflection into it so that he could put that in there. And he built a huge, like, rotating dome.
Wow.
And the inside of it, it was crazy. It was like a university-sized telescope almost. He dug like a room in the ground, and he built all these electronics that would control the telescope and like control the dome. Well, actually, the dome wasn't controlled. I think that one we had to manually move by hand, and then we would take a strip out of it so that the telescope would point through the open portion of the dome. And the funny story was about that was since we lived in Montana, a really small area, we had lightning storms. So since that thing was like a lightning rod, lightning would come in that area, it would strike that, then it would go and hit our house, because we'd have, at that time it's cable television, we'd have one of those antennas on our house, and all the power would go out.
Wow. How cool. That's amazing. I did not know that story. That's really neat. And yeah, like you said, it shows, how much of an impact the whole Roswell thing had on your father. One thing that I thought was neat too is, when you think about it, you're like, okay, of course, the son of the intelligence officer of Jesse Marcel is going to believe his father and be into this stuff. But it's not like your father's just some regular guy. I mean, he was a flight surgeon. He retired as a major. Is that correct?
My dad?
Uh-huh.
Or my grandpa?
Your dad.
He retired. Yeah, no, he retired as a colonel.
Oh, as a colonel. Yeah, so that's like a big deal.
Yeah, no, it's, and one of the things that, I don't think people realize too is it would have been so easy for my grandfather, or even my father, to have made the story even bigger than what they, saw. It would have been so easy to embellish it. But they kept it like, no, this is really, it was a small part of what had happened. This is what we saw. And, my grandfather said he never saw the aliens or anything like that, which he could have easily done to make his story sound even more, I don't know what the right word is, magnificent, bigger than what it really was. But he kept it like, no, this is what it was. This is what we saw. You can believe what you want to believe, but we know what we saw.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing about what you've talked about here is that you guys, you all had talked about it, and were aware of what Grandpa saw, in the 70s. And this didn't really blow up until maybe like the late 80s. What was that experience like, where all of a sudden this story, this family history you all have, becomes the biggest story of UFOs in the world?
Yeah, I moved out from my parents' house around 1984. So I wasn't there when that whole thing went crazy at the house, but I do know, I would meet my dad here when he'd fly into Los Angeles to go to some MUFON meetings and meet him there, and he did travel a lot from it. I think it wasn't ever expected that that was gonna ever happen. It did get kind of crazy. He met, my dad had an amazing life. He got to meet so many wonderful people because of this whole experience too.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understand too, like they did have some weird phone calls, and people were kind of like keeping tabs on them. I think. bit to just kind of know where he was and what he was doing, because he did get some weird phone calls. And he did meet that Dick D'Amato person in the Capitol building when they called him out to say, what is it exactly that you saw?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And but I'm just curious, like, at what point did you start to see this stuff show up in the media, and what was it like to you when you started to recognize, wow, this is becoming like a big deal, and how did it make you feel?
Well, I think it was probably in the early 90s, like probably 91 or 2 or something like in there. Because when I moved out to Los Angeles, I moved out here and I had stars in my eyes. I wanted to be an actress, and that kind of all changed. But that movie Roswell was made by Paul Davids, and I was in a small little part in that. And before that, I was trying to see if I could actually try to get a TV series done with like a reality kind of show. But that was kind of like before reality TV was even going on. So I was like trying to do things like that, and then I went in and like in 94, 95 or something like that, I decided to go to hypnosis school, which was the only accredited school in the United States, because I wanted to understand my dad's memories. I wanted to see how faulty or if they were, accurate. I just wanted to know how the memories worked. So what was really great about that was I think it was 97, Kent, I don't know if you know Kent Jeffries was. He had believed in UFOs, but then he kind of changed his mind about the whole Roswell thing. But he had arranged for my dad to be hypnotized by a person of Dr. Neil Hibbler, and Kent invited me to go and watch those sessions. In fact, I filmed all of them, and after that I was like, you know what, my dad's memories is great. He has a great memory, because when I saw him do the 3 days of work that they did to try to retrieve those memories, it was like, he remembers everything to the T. He may have gotten little details, like I remember he's saying, oh, now I remember clearly my dad was wearing his uniform when he came in that night and showed us the material. He remembered little details like that, but for the overall picture, nothing really changed. It was what he'd always been saying.
Mm-hmm. And then the movie, I mean, that must have been kind of strange too, work. It's a movie about your grandfather, really, and your dad, starring
Right.
Kyle MacLachlan, all of these stars in the movie. It's an awesome movie too, and for people who don't know, this is a Showtime movie. I've talked about it quite a bit because I think it's the best Roswell movie. And I just noticed somebody uploaded it on YouTube, so hopefully they don't take that down, because it's hard to get a hold of. But go look for Roswell movie. Came out in 1994 to watch this, because you got to see it. But how did that feel?
That was a really great experience, because my dad was also worked at a little bit. I think they got him out and to do some consultancy work on it and stuff like that. And I just added little tidbits like here and there. I was like, I did tell Paul, I was like, my grandfather was a serious chain smoker, so you got to add that in. It was really neat. It was a different experience seeing somebody portray your grandfather and your father. So yeah, it was pretty neat.
And did you feel that the movie? Do you think the movie and kind of the theories of what might have happened, in the background surrounding the Roswell events, is pretty accurate?
It's pretty accurate. I think they did take some liberty, but you have to do that with movies. You do that sometimes, and it was pretty good. I mean, I it's been so long since I've seen the whole thing of. I can't remember if they say something like he kept a piece or something like that, or maybe not, or he hid a piece under his bed, or I could be completely making this up.
I don't remember that part, but it was something like, I think. Yeah, that he kept a piece, but then your dad had to come to him and say, "Hey, did you keep a piece?" and gave it back, or something like that.
Right, yeah, because that never happened. And my dad really, I'm sure both of them wish that they would have kept something years later.
Yeah, but the experience, one thing I really like about the movie too is that it depicts your dad as a child when your grandfather comes home with this material. And shows it to your father, who's a kid, and they look at it, and that's essentially, what your father describes as his experience. And then, but here's one thing that I found interesting, and I'd love to hear kind of your insight on this. I asked your father about, in the movie, your Jesse Marcel's very upset about everything that happened, but your dad said he wasn't really upset. He was a soldier. He did what he was told. He was a patriot. When they told him, we've got to tell everybody that it's a balloon, give us all the material back, he said, yes, sir. He did what he was told, and that was it in his mind.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. I mean, my grandfather was a military man through and through. You got to realize, too, that was a different era, too. I mean, when you were a military man, you were a military man. You followed everything by the book. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, no, my grandfather wasn't, I don't know if he got really angry about it. I think it just was part of his job. I mean, really, when you think about it, he was pretty much part of the cover-up because he had to, when they took those photos and he asked him, I was like, oh, never saw anything. And then the next day when he saw my dad, or a couple of days later when he saw my father and my grandmother, he was just like, you know what, don't ever talk about this, treat it as a non-event. Mm-hmm. So he was told not to talk about it. But I don't think he held that as, I just think he was part of the job, part of what he had to do.
Yeah. And of course he's thinking, hey, my superiors know best. I better do what I'm told.
Exactly. Yep. And then, you think of everything that was going on in Roswell. I mean, there were the 509th bomb group, so they were dealing with like a lot of, the atomic bombs and things like that. So, who knows what it would have been. They would have probably wanted to like, okay, we need to like figure what this is that we just found out here. We don't want to talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah. It would have created a media circus around, the research they would have been trying to do.
Well, it did just from that one newspaper article that, everything blew up down there just from that. So imagine if they would have said, yes, we really did find something, how crazy it would have been. They needed to get the reporters off their backs so they could probably get down to business.
Right. So
unfortunately.
Your family, how have they felt about has it ever created any angst for you all, or you just take it in stride mostly?
You know what? I've gone up and down. When I first moved out here, I was really into it, wanted to make sure that, I was trying to tell everybody that I could, this really happened. It was real. And then I kind of backed off of it for a while because, I don't know, I started feeling negative about it because of just, I saw that some people were treating my dad not fairly, just saying bad things about him, like he had to have been making things up. And it's just, boy, it just kind of really upset me because I knew that he wasn't making anything up. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to back off of this for a while, and which I did. And then more recently, I've just been, I was at the Citizens hearing. That was when I started back getting really kind of focusing back on this Roswell stuff again. And my whole goal now is like, which was my dad's life ambition was, boy, I hope that they come out with this before I go now. It's like it keeps going from generation to generation to generation. I hope now we're on the third generation that this is going to be it. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. And I guess we should mention for people who don't know that, of course, your grandfather passed away. And was that in 2008 or 6?
Oh, you mean my grandfather passed away in 1986.
Oh, 1986, so much longer.
Yeah.
And your father was 2012 or 2013?
2013.
Yeah, so just a couple of years ago.
Right. It was literally that when we went out there to Roswell in 2013, when I saw you out there, it was a month later. Mm-hmm. And it was not funny, but I was telling the museum people, I'm like, I just have this weird feeling that this is going to be his last time coming out here.
Really?
I just had that, and I told him that, and I guess my gut was just telling me something. It just was a weird feeling. Something was up. I just knew something he wasn't feeling well. Mm-hmm. And he just, was a little bit, you saw him. It was a little bit hard for him to get around.
Yeah. It was hard for him to get around, but he had so much life in him, and I guess it was shocking to me because he was so present,
right.
And he had so much life, unlike my grandparents before they passed. So I was a bit shocked, and it was a sad thing because he was a great man. And it reminds me of the first time I went to the museum with him, because it had been a long time since he had been to the museum, and there was a little bit of angst between the city and the museum, and I had brought him in to speak for the city, and so we were a little apprehensive when we went over there. But we went in, and we went to go pay for our tickets, and I told the lady, "This is Jesse Marcel," and his pictures right there, just a few feet away from us, and she's like, okay. And I'm like, are you going to charge him to go in? And she's like, yeah, everybody has to pay to go in. She obviously didn't know who Jesse Marcel was. And this is no slight on the museum. It was probably just some help they got, for the weekend that just wasn't up to speed on all of this stuff. But it was pretty funny.
When was this? When was this?
This was probably, I can't remember, 2010, 2009, right. Maybe somewhere around there.
Right.
So that was pretty funny. So now
were you there? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No. Oh, no, I was just wondering if you were there, like, when I think it was like were you there in 2005? Because that was the last time that I think it was in 2005 that I had been in there with them, as we did it all as a family when we went down there.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not that I can think of. I can't remember what years. But I know it all gets mushed up.
Yep.
So then you've kind of invigorated your interest in the topic, so much so that are you a section director or even a state director for MUFON now?
I'm the Los Angeles section director.
Okay, yeah, that's a big section.
Yeah, it's a really big section. It's a learning experience for me. I'm, Jeff Krause had contacted me. He's the Southern California State Section Director, and he had contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in maybe reviving the MUFON Los Angeles section and doing some meetings. And so, you know what? I've been wanting to do something to contribute back to where something, at least try to help out where my father left off. And I thought, well, it's all about timing, and I guess maybe this is something I should do because it's, it landed in my lap, and, I have to believe maybe this was what it was meant to be. So I said, I'm jumping in with both feet. Let's do this.
Mm-hmm. And how's that experience been for you?
Well, I've been just trying to get the business end set up for it right now, which has taken a little bit of doing because I'm filing for all of the for the Los Angeles portion, the nonprofit status, which that takes a bit for it to go through. Mm-hmm. And then probably I'm hoping maybe around in September to try to start setting up the meetings. I just have to make sure I have to have all my ducks in a row because I'm so particular. I want to make sure that everything that I do is just right, and I want to make sure that for the people that come in for these meetings that it's a fun, learning, educational experience. Mm-hmm. It's an education for me, too, because I've never, obviously, I've gone to MUFON meetings when I was really young with my father, but, I haven't obviously held any meetings as, a MUFON person. So it's a learning experience. It'll be a good educational experience for me, too. Bringing in some of these speakers, I'll be learning at the same time, which is, I find that exciting and fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the great things about putting on, getting involved with MUFON meetings is how much you can learn from the researchers out there.
Exactly.
So it's very rewarding. But a lot of people don't know, and I've said this before when I've talked to state directors and stuff, is that how hard it is. I mean, it's a lot of work to put together and maintain an organization.
It is. Like I said, this is just I've just been working on the business end of it right now. Just have been trying to get all those details sorted out. Because working as a nonprofit, it's a little bit different than just going out and saying, okay, I'm just going to form this little company and just run it all through. No, there's a lot of things that you have to really, get your board of directors and get all of that set into place to be able to make sure that you're doing it properly.
Mm-hmm. And how do people recognize who you are or your family relationships when you go to meetings and stuff?
when I've gone to, let's say, I went down to Eric Hartman's meeting down in at MUFON, Orange County, and I didn't really tell him who I was until at the very end. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that who your father was." And he's like, "Now I understand why," because he's been actually helping me out a little bit with the MUFON Los Angeles and helping it set up too. He's been absolutely wonderful, and so I don't really go around and announce who I am. But I'm sure once I start getting these meetings going and everything, I'll kind of put it out there a little bit, but I don't want it to be about me. Mm-hmm. I truly want it to be about MUFON and who the guests are that are coming in to speak.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, having an interest in this, and I don't know if your views are similar to your father's, not that I know all of what your father's views were on this topic. Do you feel that, a visitation from some extraterrestrial civilization or multiple is an ongoing, regular thing that's happening?
I think that we probably are. I mean, I think there's just people see too much up there. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, we have all these YouTubes, and it's probably so many of them are hoaxes, but I have to believe that some of those are real. Mm-hmm. And now that we've seen, with all these exoplanets that, scientists are discovering more and more each day, it's like, the odds are, I think, would be, the odds are greater that we are getting visited than not getting visited. It's just, there's too much space out there for there to not be, I think.
Mm-hmm. What about crashes themselves? So you obviously feel there's a crash that happened in Roswell in 1947. Yes. Do you think that was a one-off type of event, or do you think that may be happening more often?
I can believe that there's been a few, maybe, but I can't believe that there's been a lot of them. I mean, unless there's some really weird magnetic field from Earth that we're setting off that's triggering the crafts to crash, it's hard for me to believe that they've traveled such long distances just to crash. Mm-hmm. Unless there is something that we have that's interfering with their mechanical, their mechanics of how their ships run, or, I don't know. That's a good question. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I know that I'm sure that we're getting visited. I just don't know about how many crashes that are happening.
Mm-hmm. And how big do you think the secret is? I mean, do you think that it is a closely held secret by a minority in the military and perhaps in people in the know and in the private sector, or do you think maybe it's a little bit smaller, kind of like, for instance, John Alexander? You might have heard his theory is more along the lines of they just don't know what to do with this stuff, so it happens. But they're just kind of impotent to do anything about it.
I think it's probably a smaller group. I think they probably have it very, I would think, compartmentalized, the different stuff that they found. So probably some people know about it, have a piece of it, or another people has another maybe portion of it, but they don't know that each other are working on the same thing but from different parts. I could easily see where something in the private sector may have gotten involved for, maybe they had a lot of money or something like that. I could see where that would have happened. I don't think a lot of people know. I don't think there are a lot of people in the know because they want to keep it as contained as they possibly can, which is so unfortunate. It's just not right.
Now, your father and your grandfather both felt that they needed to share their truths, share their information, and it seemed like that was the purpose, is just to share information for them. It doesn't seem to me that either of them really, especially your father, was that really, he didn't feel like an activist for disclosure. It didn't seem like he was like really frustrated and he wanted, did he seem frustrated about the secrecy?
I think closer to the end, he was getting more and more frustrated. I mean, he was like, his whole thing was, I know what I saw. You can believe me whether or not it's your choice to do so, but I know what I saw. Mm-hmm. And I think near the end, he was more and more wanting to really know why they weren't telling us what they really found. Because in his heart of hearts, he believes that everybody should know. He didn't believe that was a right for them to keep it covered up. Mm-hmm. It's about, it was about time for him to know. And he really, one of his things before he passed away, he's like, he always said, I hope that I hear it from the government or whoever, the powers that be, to release this information before I go. And that's what broke my heart, I think, the most of the whole thing, because he worked so hard in sharing his story and wanting people to know what he experienced. He wasn't, like you said, he wasn't really an activist, but he wanted to share his experience.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's difficult in that, it's not like he was a lifelong ufologist or UFO researcher. He was obviously very busy. In fact, when did he do his last tour? Was it 2006?
He went in, I think, in 2004, and I know that's what it was, because I know what happened was he was in 2004, he was in Iraq. 2005, that's why I brought up the Roswell thing, is he came over from Iraq to go to Roswell and do a little talk there, and then he went back, I think, for another year. And then that's when he was done with it about that. And he was 68 years old when they called him back into duty. Right.
So he's a flight surgeon in Iraq. I'm assuming on the front lines or close to it.
Yeah, he actually, he was right. I mean, his place was constantly being bombarded. I mean, I saw pictures where there were holes in the grounds of where bombs literally went off right by his tent. I mean, he went through a lot back there. Yeah. And the reason he did it, he always kept saying, he goes, I'd rather have it be me than some young person who's just starting off a family, because I've had a full life. Let me go back there. I'll do what needs to be done. If I can just have one person that doesn't have to go over there, I'll do it.
Wow. Yeah, what an impressive person. I mean, what an amazing guy he is. And but I mean, he was really busy, so I guess it's probably an issue where he thinks, I'm going to share my truth, but it's not like he can devote a lot of time to thinking about, the whole thing and what's going on. Whereas finally, when he does get to retire, he got to think a little bit more about it, maybe, and then began to think, hey, this kind of is not cool. They need to tell everybody.
You're absolutely right. I mean, he was a really busy man. He had a full-time, he was a doctor. He had a full-time practice. And at that time when we were growing up, he was the only ear, nose, and throat doctor. So he was constantly, he was just busy with that. And then at the same time, he was flying helicopters for the National Guard. So he was a very busy man, and he did what, time he could take away to go into these, these meetings, or to try to go and take a show for the History Channel or something like that. And he did what he could do at the time, but he was extremely busy. Mm-hmm. I think if he wouldn't have been as busy, he probably would have taken a more active participation in it.
Right.
But time just didn't allow.
Mm-hmm. So, and I rarely hear criticism of your father, but you do hear some of your grandfather, and some people, and I wonder some of your opinions, like some people have mentioned that he said he was a pilot and he wasn't. That's, I think, right. One of the biggest. What do you think about some of these discussions?
I've always wondered that too. It could have been. I'm actually looking into more of this. It's funny you're saying that, because I'm trying to still figure that out myself. I don't know if it was, I think that was from a Bob Pratt interview, I think, where it was the word pilot was used. So it could have been that he was in the plane, but not as a pilot. Mm-hmm. Or he could have been a pilot. I honestly do not know. I know he went on a lot of combat missions. I do know that for sure. And I do know that he was doing some photo intelligence work doing that. But like I said, I'm actually looking into more of that. I honestly don't know. I didn't really know about that until later in life, that he was being criticized for that thing. And when you say something, people can really just really nitpick at things, and it's like. But the thing is that I have to really think about is when he was doing his that Bob Pratt interview, he brought up the name Cabot. And that was at that time, people was like, oh, well, there wasn't ever a person that went out with him named Cabot. And then sure enough, years later, it's like, oh, wait a minute, there really was a guy named Sheridan Cabot. So I think his memory was a lot better than what people were giving him credit for. And that some of his things that they were criticizing him for, I think really were true. But it's like, it's to prove that, it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I've always felt that it's interesting, some of these things people bring up, but to me, it's not like it doesn't blow everything in that.
Right.
You know, he knows he experienced something strange. Now, if I were to go back to my first, what I feel was a UFO sighting, the details would be really difficult. I'm sure I would get some of those details wrong. But I would remember that I experienced something unusual at that time.
Yep.
And so.
Well, the thing is, I think it was such strange material for him. I mean, you got to think about when he was out there in that field just collecting all of this stuff. He must have been. It's like it had to have been just really, really exotic for him to have taken the time out to drive to his. I mean, even though it was the drive to his house was, towards the base, but for him to have gone home, spread it out, these piles on the floor of this material, and wake up his family to say, hey, you've got to see this. This is something you're probably never, ever going to see again. It has to be something. It couldn't have been a weather balloon. It would have been impossible to have been a mogul balloon. Those are just like such standard, as my dad would say, is a balloon is a balloon is a balloon.
Mm-hmm.
It had to have been just something very strange.
Mm-hmm. And especially for him to, years after, still believe it was something strange, especially someone who was a good soldier.
Yep.
Knowing that what the explanations that have been out there so far were wrong.
Yep. And then what were they saying that he had to mistaken the balsa wood and the tape on the balsa wood. I mean, come on now. I don't know one person who doesn't know what balsa wood is.
Mm-hmm.
I think he would have known what balsa wood was, and I think he would have known what a piece of Scotch tape was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can hear like a little bit of tone in my voice. It kind of gets me upset when people think that it's like, how could you have not known? I mean, a 9-year-old, anybody would have known that that's what, it wasn't balsa wood.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's a little different, too, when you don't know who the witness is. So, for instance, there are times where I've heard an extraordinary tale, and I think, wow, that's really neat. I want to talk to the witness. Then you find that this witness is, well, for lack of a better term, not the most intelligent person, and certainly prone to, exaggeration, and not the most accurate person. But that's not the case when it comes to, especially your father, who I knew well, and I would imagine your grandfather as well. At least in the interviews, he doesn't come across as someone like that.
Not at all. I think he was probably very smart. My dad, I know, was really smart. I mean, every time that you would see him, he only had like a Scientific American in his hand, some astronomy journal. I mean, that was what he loved reading. And in our basement, and he took this after my grandfather, I think, was electronics. And we had like a Tesla coil in our basement. We had a seismograph in our basement.
Wow.
My brothers and my father were always like playing and taking all this stuff apart and rebuilding them back together again. And again, that all I think leads back to my grandfather, who had also was really into electronics. His garage was full of all of these electronics that he would be taking apart and putting back together again. Mm-hmm. He had that love when he was a kid, and it just stayed with him through his whole life. In fact, that's one of the reasons when he was out at that debris field, he was looking really hard for any kind of things that looked like could have been the electronics, and he couldn't find anything. His only thing that he thought maybe could have been maybe what would have been considered maybe the electronic portion was maybe some of the fiber optics that they saw was something electronic, but wasn't something we'd known what it was, so he didn't know if that would have been a part of it or not. But that was the only thing that he could have attributed to maybe even closely being part of the electronics portion of what they'd found.
Mm-hmm. Now, your grandfather doesn't claim to have seen any bodies. Do you know if he believed the stories that there were bodies?
Well, what he was told, from what I understand, he always said no, he didn't see any bodies. But the people that told him, he said, were pretty reliable people. Mm-hmm. He never told us who the names were or anything like that, but he said that the people that told him were reliable. Mm-hmm. So that leads me to believe that he thought that there could have been bodies out there.
Mm-hmm. And your father, did he believe that as well?
I think he just had the same kind of opinion as my grandfather. I mean, since he never saw any of them, or my grandfather didn't see any of them, he just, heard the same stories that probably my grandfather did. And, it's one of those things. It's hard to know. I guess only the people that really saw it know for sure.
Right. Yeah. It makes it difficult. So, and that's just kind of the problem that it comes back to. And, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're experiencing this now, especially, and you will, no doubt, going forward, by heading up this group with MUFON, is that it is difficult for people to tackle anecdotal versus information versus, evidence, or what is evidence. And so, for example, anecdotal information can be poor given who's given it to you. And having met your father, it lends a lot of credence to what he has to say. So it makes it difficult.
Yeah, a lot of it's, it's like speculation. And it's like we need that, we so desperately need that tangible, something that you can grab onto and say, okay, this isn't from here. What is this? Now, speaking of something like that, of Frank Kimbler. Have you seen the pieces that he found out there in the desert?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of that stuff?
We were the ones that broke that story. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah, luckily, he had gone to a few people, and some people just, I don't know. But when he brought it to us, I thought it was fascinating, and so I wanted to write about that immediately. So, I think, the jury's still out on it, but it's interesting, and at least there's some science being done here to back up what he's doing.
Right, that's exactly what I think. It's like, at least maybe he can at least have this stuff tested. It's not something like physical that you can touch and do tests on it. Mm-hmm. When my dad looked at it, he showed my dad, and he's like, well, because it does kind of look like the color of it. And he said, in fact, it goes, upon really close examination, when Frank had it up on his screen and blown up, he goes, it looks like those, I don't know what scrape marks or whatever from something that would have exploded. So he said that kind of looks like something that could have been, because my dad did go on to, airplane crash investigation stuff. And he said that kind of looks like something that you would have found that would have been from an explosion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you just never know. It's difficult. So, yeah, I know Frank is still under way with his investigation, but that's some good stuff. And then you have stuff like, I'm reticent to bring this up, but I guess I would feel derelict in my duties if I didn't, because then you have cases like situations like this recent, the Roswell slide stuff.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I don't know, have you really rendered an opinion or?
No, because you know what? I have not. All I've seen is what everybody else has seen on the internet. And I'm not an expert when it comes to, I don't know. I mean, when I look at it, it looks like a mummy, but I'm not an expert in that field. I have no idea what I guess that place card maybe makes it a little bit more suspicious of being maybe a real mummy, but I don't know. I haven't seen it. I have not talked to Don about it. I'm hoping that maybe I can have a little talk with him about it in Roswell and see where he's at with that right now.
Mm-hmm. And you probably know Don pretty well, right?
I used to know him really well. I mean, in fact, many years ago, because I met him through, the Roswell movie, he even brought me out on one of his investigations to meet with General Exxon. Now, General Exxon, at that time was really old. He was in a retirement home, and he didn't say anything about that, but we had a really good lunch with him. So, yeah. I mean, I know Don always has probably the very best intentions. And if it isn't what it, they thought it was, you know what? Hey, human error, it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm always turned out to be an apologist for everyone, but Don's a great guy. I think his heart's in the right place, and if
I do too.
He made a mistake, it was an honest mistake.
Exactly. And you can't take away from all of his other research that he's done, worked so on, and it's like, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
You think you get excited. I think that's what happens to people in the ufology world. It's like you see something and you get so excited, and maybe you jump the gun a little bit sooner than what you should because you're just so excited about what you found.
Mm-hmm. And I guess finally it comes back to kind of just your general sense. I think it's interesting to hear from people who are kind of, you're getting reinvested into this arena. You're gonna start these meetings in LA soon, and that LA is like where the most sightings come in the whole country. And I know there's a lot of interest out there. What is your overall view? I mean, do you have a positive view when it comes to the UFO field and research, or do you feel there's a lot of challenges out there?
Oh, I still think there's a lot of challenge out there. I mean, it's you got to take. I don't even know what the word is. It's if there was a way to apply more science to these things, it would be great. It's just really difficult because mostly it's pictures. I mean, I guess you can tell these days a little bit more if a photo has been faked, but it's still, CGI and everything with the technology that we have today. It's hard to separate what's real and what's not real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, luckily, I think you have some really great mentors out there, and given such as Jeff Krause, and there's a group of UFO researchers that I like to work with who I think are careful researchers, including some of those people who have done some of the really good research on the Roswell slides and stuff that are not part of the official group, but of course a lot of these people like Jeff and a lot of the really good MUFON researchers, and you'll probably run across this as well, get criticism for being too skeptical, but I think it's important that we're all careful in order to maintain integrity and credibility.
I 100% agree with that. I think you got to be very careful because in the long run, you have to do it that way. I think you should be kind of skeptical about it. If you're not doing your job. I don't think. Mm-hmm. You got to really know what you're looking into.
Right. And
because you don't want to be part of the group of spreading out this misinformation.
Right.
I mean, you don't want. You're only helping, I think, the government in a way. Why? By passing all this misinformation out there. It only helps them.
Right. And you know what? You guys have a lot of media out there, and so I hope you get a lot of media attention. And the media appreciates a careful examination of this topic too. And I found that they will treat you well if you come from that perspective.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
So your meetings are probably going to get started up in September?
I'm hoping, it just depends on how much I've got everything set up. That's kind of my goal. I think I've got a place in it's a place called El Segundo, and where I think we're going to be holding the meetings at. Still kind of setting that up into position too. I can't book the actual date yet until I get, it's like a domino effect. When one thing happens, and the next, and the next, and the next. So I'm just waiting for that, actually the first domino to fall, so I can start getting, proceeding with what I need to do.
Mm-hmm. And then people will be able to come and see you and I next weekend in Roswell, New Mexico, at the UFO Museum and Research Center.
Oh, yes. Oh, can I say one other thing, too?
For sure.
If anybody wants to, I have it's www.mufonlosangeles.com. And if you want to go on that website and join the mailing list, then that way, once I get these up and going, then I will send out emails informing people of when the meetings are set up.
Awesome. All right. We'll put that link in the description as well. All right. So thank you very, very, very much for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait to see you next week.
Thank you so much to Denice Marcel for joining us today on Open Mind UFO Radio. Isn't she a really neat lady? And if you are in the Los Angeles area, like my sister is actually, you're probably very excited to hear that there'll be a new MUFON group starting up. So the rest of the summer, you're going to need to go to the beach and have fun and enjoy your wonderful weather out there. But come the fall, it sounds like she will have stuff getting close to ready. So you'll have your own MUFON organization out there. And, of course, I'll help her as much as possible, as well as some of the very many great people out there in California MUFON, who I'm sure will be able to help her and get things going. But that'll be great. So all of you LA people, keep an eye on this and go to the LA MUFON website, which she mentioned the URL, but you can also just go to the MUFON.com website and go to the Get Involved section and be able to find out more about your own local MUFON organization. But keep an eye out for that. And, of course, join Denice and I in Roswell, New Mexico. So, Roswell, we're going to have Don Schmidt and Tom Carey will be out there. They're actually a part of the Roswell Museum. I believe they're on the board because, of course, there's some very prominent Roswell researchers. And if you've been following the Roswell slides, of course, they were tied to that event. So we'll see what they have to say about all of that out there. But other people that go out there are Travis Moulton, Daryl Sims, Yvonne Smith, Peter Robbins, I believe, will be out there this year. Patty Greer, I think. I can't remember all of the people who go out there to talk. Aaron Sagers, my good friend Aaron Sagers, will be out there. So it'll be a lot of fun. So that's this weekend, July 2nd to the 5th. So I'll be making that trek out there. And if some of you follow me on Facebook, you know every year I always post some pictures from White Sands Missile Base typically, because we always stop there on the way out. So it ought to be a lot of fun. Otherwise, thank you to all of the people who helped make this show possible, such as Martin Willis of Podcast UFO. And for the opening and close music, thank you to Caleb Hanks of the Clerk Chronicles. And you can actually go to the radio page on the OpenMinds.tv homepage and see some of his music or listen to it. And he posts a lot of it for free. It's really good stuff. Thank you also to Roger Marsh, who writes a lot of our stories that you could see at OpenMinds.tv that Martin and I talked about at the beginning of the show. And then thank you to you all for listening. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you again this week and to introduce you, for those of you who have never heard her, to Denice Marcel. Really neat lady. So keep an eye out for her because she's very interesting. And I'm sure as we spoke, there were probably questions you all came up with that you would like to ask her about her father and her grandfather and her family. So I guess look for the LA MUFON site. You could email her there or keep an eye out at these conferences, and hopefully maybe you'll see her and be able to talk to her then. Really cool lady. So thank you for listening. Remember, OpenMinds.tv is where you can find all of those news stories that we talked about earlier. You can also find out about the UFO Congress, and I've got a special for you all. July 2nd, if you are not aware, is World UFO Day, and we are participating in that by offering a discount to the UFO Congress, the Guinness World Record largest UFO conference. We have some amazing speakers that we are lining up. I think I've already shared with you that we're going to have 4 or 5 PhDs. These are professors and scientists speaking at the conference, some of which you probably have not heard from, but all of which have amazing things to share. I'm so excited about this. But anyway, we right now are running our super early bird special. That means if you order your tickets way in advance, like right now, you're going to get the lowest price of the year. However, on July 2nd, we'll allow you the opportunity to get even a lower price. So if you go and register, you'll be able to put in a discount code. on July 2nd, you'll be able to put in the discount code World UFO Day. All one word, World UFO Day, and you'll get a further $30 off the big package, the full package, which includes the banquet dinner and the opening night dinner. Or if you want, you can just get the speakers only package. But World UFO Day will get you 30 days off that discount code. Did I say 30 days? I meant $30. $30, 30 smackaroos off of the registration. So register really early. So that's going to be the cheapest price you can get, period, ever, is if you go July 2nd on World UFO Day and register for the UFO Congress. We'll give you more information about the UFO Congress coming up because we do, as I've said, have gotten a lot of speaker requests out there. We've got a lot of affirmatives coming back. So we will be posting some of the speakers very soon, and you will be extremely pleased with the lineup. I know for a fact that people are just going to be have a great time with this lineup because the quality level is just really high with the speakers that we're going to have this year. And once you see that, you will agree. So that is it for the show today. Thank you so much for listening, and hope you. Well, actually, next weekend is the Roswell UFO Festival, so I'm going to be out there, and that's a long drive. I'll be driving home at this time next week, so I might not have a show next week. I'll do my best to maybe get an interview out there that we can share next Tuesday, but I might not have a show next week, just to warn you. Because a lot of people ask, hey, where's your show? What's going on, man? I'm missing the show. So that's what's going to be going on. But, of course, you can always join us in Roswell. Otherwise, you guys have a great July 4th weekend. Thank you so much for listening. Adios, muchachos.